Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Brock Scales, and this is True Crime Guru. Welcome back to those who aren't new, and if you are new or you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe and turn on notifications. That way you can stay up to date on all content. I also ask that you follow the channel on all social media platforms where I openly welcome engagement and post updates on these cases. Today's case is technically solved. However, there are a lot of layers and components to the story that lead a lot of people to believe that the official conclusion made by law enforcement is far from the truth. Today, I will be talking about the double homicide of 38-year-old Glinda Pulley and her 10-year-old son, Tyler Jones. I am honestly surprised that this is not a bigger story, as it involves Glinda and Tyler's murders, serial arson, insurance fraud, and another murder. As you may have gathered, today's episode does include the death of a child, so if that is a subject that you find particularly disturbing, this may not be the episode for you. It's early in the morning on April 16th, 2005, and 40-year-old Dennis Carter is arriving at his girlfriend's house because he has not been able to get a hold of her. His girlfriend is 38-year-old Glinda Pulley. Glinda resides in a home with her two children, 20-year-old Daniel Jones Jr. and 10-year-old Tyler Jones, in Arcola, North Carolina. Dennis has been dating Glinda for about a decade now, shortly after her divorce from her children's father, Daniel Jones Sr., who resides in Georgia. When Dennis arrives at Glinda's home at 372 Hamlet Road, he finds that the door is locked. Since he spends a lot of time there, he does have a key to the home, but he left it in another vehicle on this particular morning. Luckily, Daniel Jr. just happened to be arriving home at the same time that Dennis was there. Daniel Jr., who went by Danny, had stayed at his girlfriend's house the night before, and he informs Dennis that he had not heard from Glinda either. When the two get inside, there is no sign of Glinda or Tyler, and strangely, Glinda's bedroom door was locked. Dennis tries to call Glinda on her cell, but there is no answer. Now, the Pulley family is very close-knit, and several members even lived on the same road as Glinda. So Dennis calls her mom, Louise Pulley, to see if she had heard from Glinda, but she informs him that she hadn't. Dennis then drives over to Louise's and reportedly gets her so concerned that she wants to go over to Glinda's and check things out for herself. So her, Dennis, and an unnamed family member go over to Glinda's. By this time, Danny had left, so the door was again locked. Now, you would think since he was so concerned that Dennis would have gone and retrieved his key to the home, but apparently he didn't. So this unnamed family member actually kicked in the door to the house. They then asked Dennis if there was a key to Glinda's bedroom. Dennis said that it is usually in the utility room, but he had looked there and could not find it. So the unnamed family member had kicked in the bedroom door as well. And what they would find on the other side would never escape their minds. They found the deceased bodies of both Glinda and Tyler, and it was obvious that they had suffered gunshot wounds. It was about 11:15 when the Warren County, North Carolina Sheriff's Office had responded to the scene. Glinda was found in her bed with an apparent gunshot wound to the back of the head. Tyler was found propped up at the foot of the bed with an apparent gunshot wound to his chin. Notably, it has been reported that the shotgun used, which was apparently owned by the family, was still pointed at Tyler's chin and his finger was still on the trigger. Police had also located a note under a pillow on the bed. This note was presumably written by Tyler, saying he was sorry for having killed his mom. To police, this looked like a murder-suicide, but since they aren't supposed to jump to conclusions, they did not officially rule it that until they got the results of the autopsies. However, it's unclear to me when and why, but the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, or the SBI, had taken over the case. And they had officially ruled the case as a murder-suicide and closed it. Nobody in the family thought that Tyler was responsible for this. Everyone, including neighbors, said that Tyler was just a normal 10-year-old kid that absolutely adored his mom. They also said that Tyler was terrified of guns. Glinda's cousin Alicia even said that on the couple of occasions where Tyler was taken on hunting trips, that he would, quote, get physically sick if he shot a gun, end quote. And I think the most suspicious aspect that points to Tyler's innocence is the way he was found. It seems like it would have been virtually impossible for Tyler to have shot himself in the chin and for the shotgun to still be placed there with his finger on the trigger. To the family, this seems like it was staged this way. And it seems like the Warren County Sheriff's Office had a concurring opinion initially. In an interview with CBS News the day after the murder, the then Warren County Sheriff Johnny Williams said, quote, the note leads us to believe that something that happened was staged, end quote. Louise has also claimed that Sheriff Johnny Williams has told her on several occasions that they do not believe that Tyler was responsible. So it's baffling that the SBI, which is a higher law enforcement agency, had declared this a murder-suicide so quickly. There were also some aspects about the scene that had pointed to a different story. In 2011, a crime scene analyst, Dr. Maurice Godwin, had conducted an analysis of the scene and had concluded that there had been a major struggle that had taken place. A corded phone had been knocked off of the nightstand, with the phone and the cord hanging off of the hook. And nearby the phone, Glinda's ring had been located wedged in between the wall and the carpet. Dr. Godwin had concluded that some kind of heavy force had propelled the ring into that position, which really calls into question whether or not 10-year-old Tyler would have been able to overpower Glinda. And to me, the fact that she was shot in the back of the head could show that she was compliant with the killer on some level, as it would be hard to shoot someone in the back of the head during a struggle, especially one with a 10-year-old child. Dr. Godwin had also noted that there were knives that were on top of the nightstand that could have possibly been used by someone to force their way into the bedroom. Which brings me to my next point. If Tyler had in fact killed his mother and then turned the gun on himself, why would he have locked Glinda's door? It's not as if he would need to conceal anything, as he would no longer be alive to face any consequences. Now, this is just my opinion, but with the phone being found the way it was, it seems to me like Glinda and Tyler could have possibly been chased by someone into the room. Perhaps Glinda was in the process of using the phone to dial 911 when whoever was chasing them had forced their way into the room and ambushed Glinda, and then knocking the phone out of place. I'm not saying that this is what happened, but it's a scenario that played out in my mind after reading Dr. Godwin's analysis. A lot of people find the idea of parricide, which is the act of a child killing a parent, to be appalling and unbelievable. And I'm not gonna lie, I actually thought that this was something that happened all the time. But apparently it's not as common as I thought. I read a CBS News article written by Dr. Kathleen Hyde, who is a professor of criminology at the University of South Florida. She wrote that parricides only make up 1% of all homicides in the United States. She also had some interesting statistics to offer about matricide, which is a child killing their mother. She found that between 1976 and 2007, 84% of matricides were committed by adult children, and only 16% were committed by children under the age of 18. And considering how apparently rare matricides are in general, 16% being committed by minors is an extremely low number. When you take this into account, statistically, Tyler killing his mother would be an extremely rare occurrence, especially at his young age. When considering what kind of behaviors and circumstances that children who commit parricide exhibit, Dr. Hyde found that most cases fall under one of three categories: severely abused children, severely antisocial children, and severely mentally ill children. Tyler was none of these things. The family says that Tyler never portrayed any kind of behavioral problems or any sign that he was a troubled child. He was also an extremely social child who often played with other kids and was very involved in baseball and basketball. There was also no sign or record of any kind of abuse. Glinda took very good care of her children and even sent Tyler to a private Christian school. Tyler's father, Daniel Jones Sr., does not believe that his son is responsible, and even wrote a letter to the Attorney General of North Carolina in 2006, professing his son's innocence and begging for the case to be reopened. But if this was not a murder-suicide, then who killed both Glinda Pulley and her son Tyler Jones? Well, the family seems to think that the killer is Dennis Carter. And there is very good reason for that. We have to turn back the clock a little bit to December of 2004. Glinda had purchased a Cadillac Escalade, and the payments on this vehicle were $1,135 a month. Glinda had worked for the Warren County Health Department and brought home about $850 a month, respectively. There was absolutely no way that she would have been able to afford the payments on the Escalade. Well, apparently Dennis had made a deal with Glinda that he would make the car payments for her, but in return, she would need to take out some life insurance policies. Hopefully, that is setting off some alarm bells in your guys' heads. Over the course of the next several months, Glinda had taken out several life insurance policies, totaling around $750,000. The beneficiary of these policies was actually Dennis Carter's mother. You see, Dennis was actually married. Now, whether or not Dennis's wife and Glinda knew about each other and what that situation was like, I have no idea. But since he was married, Dennis asked Glinda to name his mother as the beneficiary on these policies. He had complete control over his mother's finances, so he would be the one financially benefiting from these payouts. Just a month prior to her death, Glinda had sent paperwork over to the insurance companies, specifically requesting that Dennis's mother not be made aware that she was the beneficiary. Since this is an awfully strange request, it is speculated that Dennis was the true author of these letters. Dennis's behavior in the weeks prior to the murder and immediately after was pretty bizarre as well. He had reportedly been staying with Glinda up to 2 weeks prior to the murder, with the exception of April 15th, which would have been the night prior. He had also asked Tyler to retrieve some shotgun shells from a relative just a few days prior so that they could, quote, hunt squirrels, which is something that they had never done before, and if you remember, Tyler reportedly hated guns and did not like hunting. While the Pulley family was grieving and holding services for their beloved Glinda and Tyler, Dennis did not attend. He was busy posing as Glinda's fiancé so that he could obtain her death certificate, which I'm assuming he would need in order to cash in on these insurance policies. But even with all of this extremely damning circumstantial evidence, Glinda and Tyler's case was still considered a murder-suicide and was not reopened. But this is not the end of the story, because Glinda's murder is not the only death that Dennis would be linked to. On June 24th, 2012, the Garysburg, North Carolina Fire Department had responded to a call about a vehicle that was engulfed in flames behind an abandoned trailer on Macon Price Road. This location, in relation to Glinda and Tyler's hometown of Arcola, is about 35 miles or 56 kilometers away. The vehicle that was set ablaze would be determined to belong to 29-year-old Crystal Bell. And it wouldn't take long before Crystal's deceased body was located on the back deck of the trailer. It would be determined that Crystal was shot 6 times, and according to an interview with WRAL, her mother, Brenda Bell, said it looked like half of Crystal's face was gone. I know it's going to seem like I'm telling a completely different story here, but I promise that it all ties together. I find that Crystal's murder is only briefly mentioned when discussing the case of Glinda Pulley and Tyler Jones, and I want to give Crystal's case some justice as well. Crystal Bell had just recently become a new mother. She had given birth to her daughter Miracle just 8 months before her murder in October of 2011. Strangely enough, on the very day of Miracle's birth, there was a suspicious fire at Crystal's home. This was a devastating blow, especially since she now had a newborn. But luckily, Crystal worked as an assistant to a real estate developer who had offered to help her find a new home. And his name was Dennis Carter. In the meantime, Crystal was living with Miracle's father, her on-again, off-again boyfriend, Sean Robinson. At the time of her murder, the couple was in the midst of splitting up, and there had been at least 7 recorded domestic incidents between the two. So investigators had to look at Sean as possibly being involved. However, they would find that Sean was fully cooperative, and he wanted to know who killed Crystal just as bad as anyone else. He told WRAL that he wants Miracle to grow up knowing why her mother is not there. Investigators and Crystal's family were surprised to find that someone as young as Crystal actually had a last will and testament. The beneficiary, however, was not Crystal's mother, Miracle, Sean, or any close relative as you would expect. The beneficiary was Crystal's boss and close friend, Dennis Carter. You're probably wondering what kind of money a young mother would have to bestow. Well, remember that suspicious fire on the day of Miracle's birth? Crystal was said to have received a $100,000 insurance payout for this fire, and she was said to have received it right before her murder. According to reporting done by Lance Martin for RR Spin, phone records show that Crystal had talked to Dennis Carter before and after going to the bank to receive this $100,000 in cash. She had also called Sean Robinson to ask for an additional $25,000 to help her furnish her prospective new home, which she also took out in cash. So at the time of Crystal's murder, she had approximately $125,000 in cash on her, which seems like a large sum of money to just be casually walking around with. And it seems like the only person who had knowledge of this money was Dennis Carter, who just also happened to be the beneficiary of Crystal's estate. Crystal's family believes that Dennis had coerced Crystal into naming him as the beneficiary of her will. It is unknown if he had made some kind of deal with Crystal like he did with Glinda, though. What we do know is Dennis had been helping Crystal find a new home in the months prior to her murder. And the theory is that Dennis had lured Crystal to this abandoned trailer, saying that they were just simply there to view it, but instead carried out a deadly plot. But despite this, no arrests were made and Crystal's murder would remain unsolved. But Brenda Bell and the rest of Crystal's loved ones were not giving up and decided to hire a private investigator named Norman Smith. And what he would uncover about Dennis Carter would be jaw-dropping. In addition to the suspicious fire at Crystal's home in 2011, Norman Smith would find that Dennis knew an awful lot of people whose homes were suspiciously burned. In 2007, a couple in Wake County, North Carolina, had brought up a civil lawsuit against Dennis Carter. I tried to search court records to find out exactly what this lawsuit was about, but unfortunately could not find anything. Well, apparently a Wake County judge had sided with the couple and ordered Dennis to pay them $165,000 plus interest and attorney's fees. Shortly after this ruling, a home that belonged to Dennis had caught fire in Edgecombe County. And then Dennis had attempted to transfer the deed of this home to his brother. However, a superior court would find that this entire transaction was fraudulent and that the insurance assets of the Edgecombe fire could not be used to pay the Wake County judgment. And then, in 2009, a home in Pitt County, North Carolina, that belonged to Dennis's brother was caught on fire as well. And as it would turn out, Dennis was listed as an interested party on the homeowner's insurance. I am unsure if any money was collected by Dennis from this fire, though. In addition, in 2013, some more relatives of Dennis's homes were also caught on fire. And the final nail in the coffin would come when some friends of Dennis's had reported 2 suspicious fires in their home. And it would be found that Dennis had forged their signatures on some building permits so that a construction company that was owned by him could be paid for the costly repairs. Because of this, Dennis Carter would be arrested on felony charges of larceny and forgery. I again tried to find out what came of these charges, but came up empty-handed. There is obviously a lot to unpack here, so let's get into it. If anything, I think that we can at the very least conclude that Dennis Carter is shady as hell. It's very rare to be acquainted with one person who was murdered, and he is acquainted with 3, 2 of which he was the beneficiary of very large sums of money, which is also rare. Dennis Carter seems to have allegedly made a career of attempted insurance fraud, suspected serial arson, and possibly even a serial killer. As I mentioned in the introduction, it is surprising to me that this is not a bigger story. Outside of North Carolina, there is not much media coverage about Glinda and Tyler's case, or Crystal's case for that matter. For me, it seems like there is substantial circumstantial evidence in both cases to maybe at the very least convene a grand jury. Private Detective Norman Smith says that he does not believe that the investigative agencies are coordinating with each other. It really seems like if the law enforcement agencies involved in these cases could compare notes, they might be able to find something that could solve these cases. The family of Glinda Pulley and Tyler Jones have had to spend the last 19 years with everyone thinking that little Tyler was responsible for this tragedy. They desperately want law enforcement to reopen this case and clear Tyler's name. And Crystal Bell's murder is going on 12 years unsolved, and her daughter Miracle deserves to know why her mother is not here. I ask that you keep both the Pulley and the Bell families in your thoughts and prayers, and share their stories so that law enforcement can get these cases solved. If you have any information about the murders of Glinda Pulley and Tyler Jones on April 16, 2005, please call the Warren County, North Carolina Sheriff's Office at 252-257-3936. Also, if you have any information about the murder of Crystal Bell on June 24th, 2012, I ask that you contact the Northampton County, North Carolina Sheriff's Office at 252-534-2611. Or you can contact private investigator Norman Smith about either of these cases at 910-308-3732. Or you can fax anonymously at 866-596-8905. Thank you everyone for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, and while you're at it, go ahead and subscribe and turn on notifications. I also love to hear your guys' thoughts, so don't be shy about utilizing the comments, or you can hit me up on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. You can also DM me on social media with any case suggestions, or you can email me directly at truecrimeguruchannel@gmail.com.